Things have changed over the past 30 years. We've come from a place where a company competes against another company. And if you offer better value to your customer, you get more customers, you make more profit, and it's usually a local competition. Now we're getting to the point where it's not just a local competition, it's a national competition or international competition. And it's not just company versus company, it's supply chain versus supply chain. In other words, the value that I give my customer is very reliant upon my supply chain and the value I get from my supply chain. Same with anybody I'm competing against. So the better I can develop a supply chain, the better suppliers I have, and the better supply chain I have, the more value I can offer my customer, and thus the more profit and the better that my company is going to do. When we look at supply chain technology, we're looking at our ability to manage that extended company. So not just our company. We all know it's hard to manage just our company. But now we're talking about our extended company, or our suppliers, and sometimes our suppliers' suppliers. We just can't do that with any sense of efficiency or competence without good, solid information. And that's where IT comes to play. So we know that IT is important to help us manage our supply chain, to help us manage our suppliers and our own company. So what are some of the requirements we have for that IT solution for our supply chain? Well, one, when we're looking at IT solutions, we know that they have to be able to allow us to access the information when we need it. So if I'm a buyer, say in London, but I'm required to make sure I have enough inventory throughout the United States, and I need to be able to access the information for our company's inventory in the United States. So that access has to be allowed to me. And not only does it need to be allowed to me, right? I need to be able to get to it, but I don't have to jump through a ton of hoops to get to it. So if I have to log into my system and then there's like 2 or 3 extra logins just to get the information from the US, when that's my job to manage that inventory, that's problematic. So we need to make that smoother, more user-friendly. Also, the information needs to be relevant. When I'm looking at a global IT solution, I'm collecting a ton of data. I'm doing goods receipts, goods issues, scrapping, I'm doing production operations. There's just so many different things that quality information that I'm gathering, right? And if I'm a buyer of commodities, there's so much information I don't need. So I need reports that can be filtered or can be funneled directly towards me without a lot of extra data. So I don't have to spend half my time deleting lines, filtering, sorting, that kind of stuff. I need relevant data to help me make good decisions. It also needs to be accurate. That's kind of like a no-brainer, but one of the problems that we'll see when we have an IT solution is that they'll say, hey, it's your responsibility to make it accurate. We'll say, you help us make it user-friendly enough so that when our engineers come and take a part off the shelf, they don't have to spend a half an hour filling out forms to say that that material is now at the engineering side of the production. So if that's not the case, if the engineers don't have that ease of access, what they'll end up doing is just going in and stealing stuff. And that sounds weird because they're not taking it home, they're just taking it over to the desk and putting it into an engineering project. But then my shelf is not accurate. And if I'm buying for that part and my system says there's 100 and there's only 80 and we have a production of 90, that means I'm going to be 10 short. And that customer is going to be short 10 parts. I have an unhappy customer, I have an unhappy production line, and that's all because it would take the engineer too long to say that this is now over in the engineering part. So it needs to be accurate and needs to help us let it be accurate. Also needs to be timely. Sometimes we have interfaces that we don't update all the time because it takes so much memory space and processing time. So what we'll do is we'll only update things in the evening or on the weekend. Well, that might be fine for some things and not others. And if we're finding that it's a problem for our production schedule or our customer service levels, we need to find another solution so that information we're getting is more readily available. The last thing we want to talk about is transferable. this is talking about, we've talked about there's so much data out there. Well, if it takes me an hour to run a report, download it into a doc file, and then transfer that doc file over into an Excel file, and now I can start doing some analysis on the data, that's problematic, right? So we want it to be easily transferred into Excel files or easily talk to our suppliers or our customers, so we have more fluid information flow throughout the supply chain. And that allows us to make decisions faster and more accurate and so forth. Okay, well, we know that we have a lot of demands for our IT department or our IT solution for our supply chain. And one of the reasons we're so demanding is because we know, and that's what this first bullet talks about, we know that good information technology has a positive impact on our performance, internal and external. So the better our IT, the better our performance, the better we collaborate internally and externally. Now, there are some problems implementing new IT solutions. Sometimes we find people that look at their problem that they're having in the production, some quality problems, or the way that their operators are performing certain tasks or keeping track of certain things, and they see this IT solution as a way of doing change management or forcing change management. What we found is that it doesn't work that way. You actually have to do the change management in preparation for an IT solution. That's one of the problems that managers have, and that means that their expectations of this IT deployment are out of line. One of the other problems, and this is probably the biggest problem we find in most of our implementations, are that people are the problem. They don't want to use it, or they don't want to use it properly, or they don't understand how to use it. So whenever we're introducing a new IT solution or new IT tool, there's a lot of training that needs to go on. And there's also a lot of hand-holding. When I've been doing deployments as an independent contractor or as a consultant through IBM, one of the things that we notice is that we're spending tons and tons of money to bring in this IT solution, and some people fear that they're going to lose their jobs. And we're doing some change management, and part of that change management is saying, hey, no, don't worry, you're not going to lose your job, but this is how you're going to do your job differently. Sometimes you even have to say and delineate everything that they do right now, everything they're responsible, and saying, this is what you do right now, and this is how you do it, and this is how you're going to do that after the IT solution is in. That usually helps them understand the whole process and helps them feel comfortable. A lot of times we have new practices or new capabilities that the IT solution brings to the table, and that means that the way we used to do things, we don't have to do them that way anymore. All we have to do, instead of filling out this paperwork every time we have a goods receipt, all we have to do is now scan this barcode and hit this button, and it's already in this system. A lot of things that used to take a lot more time are a lot easier, but if you're used to, and if you've got in trouble for not filling out the paperwork, again, we have some change management issues. We need to match the IT process to the IT solution so we're gaining all the efficiencies that we're paying for. Another problem we have is that a lot of people have their favorite tool. So when I was a consultant, I normally worked with a tool called SAP, huge system. A lot of major companies in the Valley use SAP. SAP has forecasting, it has goods receipts, it has inventory management, it has all these things. You might have your own forecasting system that you love and you know really well. So instead of saying, okay, I'm going to learn the new SAP forecasting system, you're saying, hey, I want everything in SAP except the forecasting, and then I want to patch that in. Or except the forecasting and the HR. Now SAP is really, and most of these big systems are agile. So we can say, okay, this module is going in and this one isn't. And now we're running these interfaces. Well, the more interfaces you have, the more opportunity for those interfaces to break. And so this kind of patchwork pool of technologies is not very efficient. And you're already paying for this really super system. Let's go out of your comfort zone and go into it. Poor planning and preparation. One of the reasons they hired me and hired IBM or whoever I was working for is because we have experience going into companies and taking them from their old systems and putting them on new systems that work better. And if you're trying to do it on your own, it's going to just take a lot more time and effort and pain. There's a local company, a fairly big local company, that was trying to do that. They actually interviewed me to hire me on as full time, and I looked at how they're going about implementing SAP, and I just really let them know, you guys have no idea what you're getting into. And for you to get me to sign on to this. It's going to cost you this much. And they thought I was kind of a jackass because I was giving them a big dollar amount. Well, I've been around the block. I knew what was going on, and I kept on hearing these stories from that deployment going, oh, I'm so glad I didn't go and join them. Even if they had given me the money that I was asking for, it wouldn't have been worth it. They have, and they still are going through a rough deployment. I like how this slide shows the way the information flows from the various parts of our manufacturing or our company, production, logistics, finance, and marketing, how they interact. So there's some internal information flows that are going between marketing, logistics, and production, right? Marketing saying, hey, this is our forecast. We're getting that information from the customer, and this is what we need to produce. So you see those kind of flows going back and forth. And once we know what we need to buy for production, then we can talk to our suppliers, get those parts ordered. Sometimes that requires getting 3PLs involved to get the parts in on time. There's also this interesting flow in between the government and the financial institutions. So what we're doing on a regular basis, well, a publicly traded company every 3 months has to do this big report on their quarterly earnings and all that stuff. So that happens on a quarterly basis every 3 months. There's also a lot of information that will go back and forth between the government if you're under some regulations. So if you're working on medical devices, or you're working on pharmaceuticals, or even you're a manufacturer of plane parts or auto parts, there are quality requirements, and there are some material requirements. There's a lot of different requirements that you have to abide by, and you have to prove that you abide by. On a regular basis, you have to send that information to the government. So that's what this slide is about. All right, this is one of the busiest slides we have in the course. The drivers of a sustainable supply chain practice. So there's all these different drivers, and these drivers are relevant to supply chain, right? Not just when we're talking about IT, but all of supply chain. So it's important that you know these drivers and know their definitions, and then it's important that you understand how IT, or the role of technology, how they contribute to help us support these drivers. Again, I'm not going to read this to you. That's not my intent. I'm going to point this table out to you. I'm going to say, hey, you guys need to understand this table. It's in your book. I don't like the idea of memorizing, but if I say velocity, or if I have on the test a question about velocity, you really need to know what I'm talking about. And this is the definition. And then I might have on the test, well, velocity is supported by IT by the X, Y, or Z. And you need to know that Y is IT's role in that. These are the 10 golden rules for a successful IT deployment. Now remember, when we're doing an IT deployment, this is a tool we're bringing in to help the business become more efficient and more effective at reaching their goals. We're trying to add value to the end customer. There's a lot of change management involved. So one of the first rule is secure commitment from senior management. One, so they have proper expectations of what this tool or this solution will give them. Also, so if there's problems, they understand how important it is, and they can give us more resources or money to make sure it goes through. Remember that it's not just an IT project. This is something that should add value to the customer. How it adds value, that might be a question mark, but in the end, the customer needs to be a more satisfied customer from our IT project. Sometimes the IT project is just so we can report our compliance to the government. But if we don't do that, the government's going to shut us down and our customers aren't going to be happy. Align the project with business goals. Sometimes we have pet projects that really don't match our CEO's direction. So we need to make sure that even though you think this is going to be great for the company, make sure that it supports what your managers are trying to do. Understand the software's capabilities. You need to make sure you understand that, and you also need to make sure your senior management understands that. Again, we're setting expectations. If we set expectations and we exceed those, awesome. If we don't meet them, we have a disappointed customer. Select partners carefully. Sometimes this can take a year to go through all the various customers that offer this IT solution, see what kind of support they have, what kind of success they've had. Sometimes you'll even take trips to other companies, see their plants, and see how they're using the IT solution. Follow proven implementation methodology. If you don't know what that is, you need to hire somebody in that knows what that is. In other words, well, usually when we're going through listings that I see, they're looking for people who've gone through like 3 or 4 implementations before they're going to hire you as a consultant. Part of that proven implementation methodology is a step-by-step approach where we have different phases of implementation, especially for big projects, and we have these gates that we need to pass through, and each gate has certain requirements. And once we get through the first gate or the second gate, and the first gate could be, gather all the requirements from the end users. And once we have those requirements gathered and understood, and not only understood, but then we give it back to them so they can certify, those are the requirements. That's a gate that we've passed through, and we celebrate that. Be prepared to change business processes. We've talked about this before. Keep end users informed and involved. Again, it's change management. There's so much change management in an IT deployment. And then measure success with key performance indicators. We talked about measurements and how important measurements are in other chapters. Same here. We need to know when can we say we're successful? And we have these measurements that are not feeling measurements, but actually number measurements that say, oh, okay, we have done this, we were successful, when we changed the inventory from this system to this system, the numbers match, we didn't lose any money or gain a lot of money,